And welcome to Mindset Matters Book Club YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries.
Today, we are embarking on a deep dive that I think tackles one of the most frustrating parts of fitness.
Resistance training. We're going to try and cut through all the confusion, the hype, and just the overwhelming noise that seems to plague anyone trying to get stronger or build muscle.
Oh, it's a field that is it's polluted. You have self-proclaimed gurus everywhere, clickbait sound bites, and advice that's so conflicting it just sends people, even experienced lifters, into the state of paralysis.
Yeah, analysis paralysis. People get so stuck agonizing over these tiny little details, the pebbles, as the book calls them, while they're completely ignoring the huge, big rocks that actually drive progress.
Right, and you hear the questions all the time.
All the time. What's the single best isolation exercise for my upper chest? Or should I be doing German volume training?
Exactly. And those questions, they sound sensible on the surface, but they show a complete misunderstanding of what's actually important.
Which is the entire point of the book we're diving into today, the muscle and strength pyramid training.
This book, and it's by Eric Helms, a PhD in CSCS, along with Andy Morgan and Andrea Valdez from the 3D Muscle Journey team.
Yeah.
It provides this much-needed system.
A hierarchy, right. They structure the entire science of training into this 6-step training pyramid.
And it's so effective because level 1 is the absolute foundation, the most critical part. And as you go up the pyramid, the importance of each level gets, progressively smaller.
What I love is that it forces you to be accountable. The author's whole goal, and this is based on years of coaching and research, especially with drug-free athletes, is to bridge that huge gap between the dense academic science and what you actually do day to day in the gym.
It's basically the guidebook they wish they had when they first started lifting. It helps a total novice skip years of confusion and wasted time.
But it's also got enough depth to help a seasoned veteran refine what they're already doing. It forces you, the listener, to really check your priorities.
Make sure those big rocks are in place before you even think about the pebbles.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the absolute foundation, the whitest part of the pyramid, which they call level 1, adherence.
So level 1 sounds deceptively simple.
It always does.
It's just, it doesn't matter how optimal a program looks on paper. It could be the most scientifically perfect spreadsheet in the world.
Right.
If you can't consistently stick to it, it is completely and utterly irrelevant.
It's consistency, not chasing some mythical idea of perfection that actually gets you results over the long term.
I think this is where even a lot of advanced lifters get tripped up. They'll read a new study, design this beautiful program, and then realize it needs 90 minutes, 6 days a week.
And life gets in the way.
And they crash and burn after 3 weeks. Exactly. So trying to force this optimal plan into a life that can't support it, well, optimal just remains a pie in the sky idea, as they say.
So the authors break down adherence into 3 key conditions, right?
That's right. They say your training has to be realistic, enjoyable, and flexible.
Let's start with realistic. That sounds like common sense, but how do they define it in a practical way?
Well, it shows up in 2 main areas. The overall time frame of your plan and then the day-to-day schedule.
Okay, so the time frame, like if you're training for a powerlifting meet that's 20 weeks away.
Precisely. Your program has to logically fit into that 20-week window. You can't just find some random 8-week cookie-cutter program online and try to jam it into the last 6 weeks. It just doesn't work.
And then there's the day-to-day reality check.
Which is maybe even more important. They use this great example of a father who works 50 hours a week, has a family, a commute, all the normal stresses of life.
Right.
That person cannot realistically adopt the training schedule of a full-time sponsored bodybuilder who's in the gym for 2 hours, 6 days a week.
That's where ego gets in the way, though, isn't it? People see what the pros do and think that's the only way.
It's a huge trap. The book is really forceful on this point. You have to start with what you can do, not what you think you should do.
So if a 5-day split is perfect on paper, but your life only allows for 4 days without creating massive stress.
You have to let go of the 5-day idea. A sustainable, suboptimal 4-day program will get you so much further in the long run than a perfect 5-day plan they're always missing or burning out from.
So accepting good enough consistently is better than chasing perfect inconsistently.
100%. Which brings us to the second condition for adherence, making the training enjoyable.
This is one people often dismiss as like fluffy or not serious.
But the psychology is absolutely critical. If you genuinely love your program, even if it has a few minor flaws, Maybe it has a bit too much bench press because that's your favorite lift.
Uh-huh.
The motivation you get from that enjoyment leads to better effort. And that better effort in a slightly suboptimal plan will almost always beat mediocre effort in a perfect plan that you dread doing.
It creates a kind of positive feedback loop.
Exactly. Enjoyment makes you train harder, which gets you better results, and those results make you enjoy it even more. It's self-perpetuating.
The book mentions a study about focusing on the process versus the end goal. That seems really important here.
It's fascinating. The study showed that people who focused on the positive feelings during the workout, the feeling of getting stronger, the mental focus, just the satisfaction of a hard set,
Yeah.
they had way better long-term consistency than the group that was only focused on the final prize, like hitting a certain number on the scale or a PR in 3 months.
So you have to learn to love the act of lifting, not just the idea of the result.
It shifts your motivation from external to internal. And that's a perfect lead-in to the third condition, which is flexibility.
Because life happens. No one trains in a perfect bubble.
Right. And the book treats everything as a stressor. Your training, your diet, your sleep, your job, relationship worries. It all goes into one big bucket.
And we only have a limited capacity to deal with that stress.
Exactly. So if your work stress suddenly goes through the roof or you get sick, your body's ability to adapt and recover from training just plummets.
There's research on this, right? That high life stress actually blunts your gains.
Yeah, they cite studies showing that people who experience a lot of negative life events, like a family illness or major work pressure, they show way less adaptation to their training program, even if the workouts themselves stay the same.
So just trying to power through a rigid spreadsheet when life is chaotic it's not just hard, it's actually counterproductive.
It is. And that's why you need what they call auto-regulation or structured flexibility. It's about matching the training stress of the day to your ability to handle your total life stress.
Okay, so let's talk about the most common disruption.
Ah.
You miss a workout. People panic.
They do. But the advice is simple. Don't panic. Just skip it. Proceed with your next scheduled workout. Your body doesn't run on a strict 7-day calendar. One missed session in a 12-week plan is nothing.
The temptation is to try and cram it in, right? Train 2 days in a row when you're meant to have a rest day.
And that's usually a mistake. Now, the book says training on, say, a Thursday and Friday when you were supposed to train Wednesday and Friday is generally fine on occasion.
But there's a big but.
A huge one. If you have to do that, you must be willing to drop the load. You have to prioritize the intended effort of the session, the RPE, not the weight on the bar that was written on your spreadsheet.
You're managing fatigue, not just checking boxes.
Precisely. And one last point on flexibility. What about other sports? Lots of people who lift also run, or do martial arts, or play football.
Right, concurrent training.
The rule is simple. One activity has to be the priority. You can't serve two masters and expect optimal results in both.
So if you're a football player, using lifting to get better at football.
The lifting always serves the sport. That means you avoid risky exercises, you stay away from failure, and you do the minimum effective volume to get stronger without creating soreness that hurts your practice.
And that leads to the classic conflict, the interference effect, when you combine something like marathon training with heavy lifting.
This is a great topic because it gets blown way out of proportion. It's a real thing, for sure. The signals for endurance adaptation can sort of run counter to the signals for maximum strength and hypertrophy.
It's at the cellular level, right? AMPK versus mTOR pathway.
Exactly. You get conflicting messages. One pathway is saying we need to be more efficient and resist fatigue, while the other is saying we need to build bigger, stronger muscle fibers. It's like a signaling traffic jam.
So it doesn't stop gains, it just slows them down.
It primarily slows the rate of gain. You can still get stronger and bigger, just not as quickly as if you were only lifting. So the goal becomes mitigation.
And how do you mitigate that?
The best strategies are common sense. The worst thing you can do is hard cardio right before you lift. The best thing is to separate them by at least 6 hours, or even better, put them on separate days entirely.
It all comes back to managing stress and recovery. Level 1 is about building the foundation. If you jump to the fancy stuff before this is solid, you're building on quicksand.
It's the single most important part of the whole pyramid. Once that's in place, then you can move up to level 2. Volume, intensity, and frequency. The VIF variables.
Okay, VIF. We hear these terms thrown around a lot. But the book really emphasizes that you can't treat them as three separate things. They're all interconnected.
Completely. You can't change one without affecting the others.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you jack up your intensity of effort training really close to failure all the time,
RPE 9 or 10.
right, you're creating more muscle damage, which means you need more time to recover, and that longer recovery time automatically limits your training frequency.
And the same thing happens with heavy weights, right? High intensity of load.
Absolutely. If you're lifting at 85% of your max or higher, you need longer rest periods between sets, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. That time adds up, which can limit the total volume you can get done in one workout.
And the reverse is true too. If you try to cram in a ton of volume, like 16 sets of squats in one day,
your intensity is going to tank. By the end, the quality of those sets is just garbage because of the fatigue. So finding the right balance of VIF is this constant juggling act.
let's break them down, starting with intensity. The authors are really big on moving away from just how it feels to something you can actually measure.
Yeah, they define it in two objective ways. First is intensity of load, which is just the weight on the bar, as a percentage of your 1 rep max or rep max. Second is intensity of effort. This is how close to your limit that load feels, and that's best measured by RPE, the rate of perceived exertion.
Okay, so let's talk about the problem with just using percentages of your 1 rep max. The book has a great example for this.
It's a critical point. Percentages are a decent starting point, but they're not individualized at all. The research they cite is staggering.
What did it find?
For the back squat, they found that at 70% of a 1 rep max, some trained lifters could only get 9 reps, while others could get as many as 26.
Wow, that's a massive difference. So if a program says do 3 sets of 10 at 70%, for one person that's easy, and for another, it's impossible.
Exactly. You're either undertraining or you're pushing way too hard. And that's why RPE, or repetitions remaining, is so powerful. It's the ultimate tool for autoregulation.
So just to recap, RPE is a scale from 1 to 10, where the number tells you how many good reps you had left in the tank. RPE 8 means you could have done 2 more. RPE 10 is failure.
Right. And this lets you adjust the weight day by day. Let's say your program calls for 3 sets of 8 at an RPE of 7. You come in, you had a terrible night's sleep, you put 225 on the bar.
Which is normally manageable.
Right. But that first set of 8 feels brutal. You realize you only had 1 more rep in you. That was an RPE 9.
So the system immediately tells you that today's plan is too heavy for your current state.
Correct. So instead of stubbornly sticking with 225 and grinding yourself into dust, auto-regulation tells you to drop the weight, say to 205, to make sure you can hit that target RPE of 7 for the next 2 sets.
It prevents you from overreaching when life stress is high. But what about the opposite? What about ego? RPE requires you to be brutally honest with yourself.
That's the biggest hurdle. A lot of lifters confuse technical failure with muscular failure. They'll be aiming for an RPE 8, and their form completely breaks down on the rep, but they think, well, I could have forced out 2 more ugly ones.
So they call it an RPE 8, but it wasn't really.
Exactly. The book stresses that RPE is about perfect repetitions remaining. To get good at it, you have to practice, and you have to regularly test your actual rep maxes to calibrate what a true RPE 10 feels like.
This leads right into the big debate about training to failure. The book seems pretty clear that you shouldn't do it very often.
For a very good reason. It kills your total effective volume. People think max effort equals max gains, but it doesn't work that way.
Can you walk through the numbers on that?
Sure. Let's say you do 3 sets of 8, and you take every set to absolute failure. You might get 8 reps on set 1, but the fatigue is so high you might only get 6 on set 2 and maybe 4 on set 3. That's 18 total reps.
Okay, and what if you stop short at an RPE 8?
You'd accumulate way less fatigue. You'd probably be able to hit 3 clean sets of 7 reps. That's 21 total reps, more volume, and you've generated far less systemic stress, so you'll recover faster for your next session.
So going to failure all the time can actually lead to less total work being done over the week.
It's a vicious cycle, and the big meta-analysis they discuss found no significant advantage for strength gains when comparing training to failure versus stopping a few reps short.
That's a huge finding. So when is it okay to go to failure?
It should be used like a tool for a specific purpose. For 1RM testing, obviously, or on an AM rep set. But mostly, it should be reserved for isolation movements at the end of a workout.
Like bicep curls or lateral raises.
Exactly. Taking a bicep curl to failure is much less taxing on your whole system than taking a heavy squat to failure. It's safer, and the recovery cost is much lower.
Okay, let's shift gears from hypertrophy to pure strength. What does the ideal mix of VIF look like for that?
Well, strength is more complex than just muscle size. It's about structural adaptation, which is muscle mass, but it's also about neuromuscular adaptation, the skill of the movement, and specificity.
So you need to lift heavy to teach your nervous system how to be efficient.
You absolutely do. You need that high load exposure. But, and this is key, you shouldn't be living in that 90, 100% of your 1RM range.
Why not?
Because your technique falls apart, you reinforce bad habits, and the injury risk is high. They highlight a really cool study that looked at the total number of reps done in that super heavy zone over 10 weeks.
And what was the sweet spot?
The group that did a moderate amount, about 93 total reps in that 90-100% range over 10 weeks, got the strongest. They did better than the group that did too little, and also better than the group that did way too much.
So there's a Goldilocks zone for heavy lifting.
It's all about balance, and that balance is managed through frequency. If volume and intensity are what you're doing, frequency is how you organize it across the week to manage that stress.
And the book uses the analogy of learning a skill, right?
It's a perfect analogy. You wouldn't practice golf for 8 hours straight on a Monday and then not touch a club again all week.
You'd be exhausted and your technique would be terrible by the end.
Exactly. Strength is a skill. So splitting your total squat volume across 2 or 3 sessions a week instead of one marathon session improves the quality of each rep and gives you more opportunities to practice the skill.
And when you're calculating all this, you have to remember the overlap between exercises.
Oh, this is a huge one people miss. The bench press is the classic example. People think it's just a chest exercise.
But your front delts and your triceps are doing a ton of work.
A ton. So if you do 10 sets of bench press on Monday and then only 3 sets of triceps pushdowns on Friday, you might think your triceps volume is too low.
But it's not, because of all the indirect work from the benching.
Precisely. So you have to look at the total picture. If you're hitting your big compound lifts hard and consistently, a lot of the smaller muscles are getting plenty of stimulus, even with low direct volume.
Okay, so once you've dialed in your VIF, you have to make sure you're consistently making things harder over time, which takes us to level 3, progressive overload and periodization.
Level 3 is the engine of progress. The core idea is simple: progressive overload. To keep getting bigger and stronger, the stimulus has to get harder over time.
If you're lifting the same weights for the same reps year after year, your body has no reason to change.
Exactly. And the rate at which you can progress is dictated by your training age. The book has a great definition for this. It's not about how many years you've been in a gym.
It's about how close you are to your genetic potential.
Right. You could be lifting for 10 years with no real plan and still be a functional novice.
So let's start there. With the novice, how do they progress?
A true novice can adapt incredibly fast. Progression for them should be session to session. Literally, every time they go to the gym, they should be trying to add a little bit of weight to their main compound lifts.
We're talking 5 or 10 pounds every single workout.
For a while, yes. It's an amazing phase. You can add 30, maybe 50 pounds to your total in just a few months. But that linear progression will eventually stall.
And that's when you become an intermediate.
That's the graduation. And now, progression has to switch from session to session to week to week. You need a more structured approach.
This is where something like wave loading periodization comes in.
It's a classic intermediate model. The goal is still to increase the load, but you do it over a cycle of, say, 3 or 4 weeks.
Can you give us a practical example of a 3-week wave?
Sure. Let's say you're working on your squat. Week 1, you might do 3 sets of 5 reps at a moderate intensity, maybe an RPE 7. That's your volume week.
Okay.
Week 2, you add a little weight to the bar, and you drop the reps to 3 sets of 4, still at RPE 7. Then week 3, you add weight again and do 3 sets of 3, but maybe push the RPE to an 8.
And then after that 3-week wave,
You'd start a new wave, trying to use slightly heavier weights for your 5s, 4s, and 3s than you did in the last cycle. It's a structured, measurable way to progress.
and what about for smaller isolation exercises? You can't just add 5 pounds to your dumbbell curls every week.
No, so for those, you use double progression. You pick a rep range, like 8 to 12 reps. Your first goal is to add reps.
So you stick with the same weight until you can do 3 sets of 12.
Exactly. Once you can hit the top of that rep range for all your sets, then you increase the weight by the smallest possible increment, drop back down to 8 reps, and start the process of building reps all over again.
That makes a lot of sense. And then finally you have the advanced lifter.
At this point, you're so close to your genetic ceiling that progress is brutally slow. We're talking maybe adding 5 pounds to your squat over an entire 8 to 12 week training block.
And this is where you need to get really sophisticated with periodization models.
Right. Periodization is just the long-term planning of your training. The book covers the main models. The first one is linear periodization.
That's the classic model, right?
Yeah.
Volume starts high and goes down, while intensity starts low and goes up over time.
It is. It works great for novices and intermediates. Then you have block periodization, which is more common for advanced athletes.
This is where you dedicate a whole block of training, like a month, to one specific goal.
Exactly. You might have a 6-week accumulation block where the focus is on high volume to build muscle and work capacity.
And you follow that with what, an intensification block?
Right. A shorter 2 to 4 week block where you drop the volume way down but crank up the intensity to peak your strength. You build the engine, then you tune it for performance.
And the third model is daily undulating periodization, or DUP.
DUP is where you vary the focus within the same week. So Monday might be a hypertrophy day with high volume, Wednesday is a power day with lightweight move fast, and Friday is a heavy strength day.
So you're hitting all those qualities every week.
Yeah, which can be great for staying fresh and practicing this.
Okay, so after you finish one of these progression cycles, what happens? You can't just keep pushing forever.
No, you need to manage fatigue. This is where auto-regulating deloads comes in. A deload is a planned week of lighter training to let your body fully recover.
And how do you know when you need one?
The signs are usually pretty clear. You have nagging aches and pains, you've lost motivation, your sleep is bad, or the weights just feel way heavier than they should. A deload usually means cutting your volume in half, but keeping the intensity moderate.
It's like a strategic pit stop.
Exactly. And one last thing on progression. What happens when you're in a long, aggressive diet or a cut?
This is where people get it wrong. They try to keep their training volume high to burn more calories.
Which is a huge mistake. When you're in a calorie deficit, your ability to recover is shot. The book's advice is clear. Your priority is to preserve muscle and strength.
So you need to keep lifting heavy.
You keep intensity high, you keep frequency the same, but you have to drop your volume. The high intensity signals to your body that it needs to hold on to that muscle. The high volume just creates damage you can't repair.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, now we're getting into the more individualized stuff. Level 4, exercise selection, technique, and specificity.
Right, so with exercise selection, how important it is really depends on your goal. If you're a strength athlete, like a power lifter.
Then it's everything. Your sport is the squat, bench, and deadlift.
Exactly. So those competition lifts, or very close variations of them, have to make up the bulk of your training, maybe 50 to 75% of your total volume.
And the rest is just accessory work to fix weak points.
Right. But for a hypertrophy athlete, a bodybuilder, the goal is different. It's about building a balanced aesthetic physique.
So they need more variety.
They do. They'll typically use 1 or 2 big compound lifts per muscle group, and then maybe 1 to 3 isolation exercises to really target specific areas.
But for a novice, the advice is still to focus on the big compound lifts first.
Oh, absolutely. The squat, deadlift, bench press, overhead press, rows. Those give you the most bang for your buck for overall muscle growth when you're starting out.
And this all comes back to specificity. The gains you make are specific to the movement you train.
Yeah, you can build huge quads on the leg press, but if you never practice the actual skill of squatting, that strength won't fully transfer over to a heavy barbell squat.
The squat is a skill, the leg press is just a tool for volume.
A perfect way to put it. And that's why your main core lifts should stay in your program for a long time, for multiple training cycles, so you can master the skill.
But the smaller isolation stuff, you can swap that in and out more often.
For sure. Now, a huge part of level 4 is selecting exercises based on your own individual anatomy. We're not all built the same.
The example of someone with long femurs in squatting is a classic one.
Right. For someone with long thigh bones, a traditional low bar squat might force them to lean over so much that it becomes all hips and lower back, and their quads get very little work. It might even cause pain.
So forcing that movement is a bad idea.
A terrible idea. That person might be much better off with a high bar squat or a front squat or even a safety bar squat. You have to match the tool to the person, not force the person to fit the tool.
Let's talk about fixing weak points. The book breaks them down into hypertrophy and strength weaknesses.
So a hypertrophy weak point is just a muscle that's lagging in size. And a lot of the time, this comes down to poor execution or not having that mind-muscle connection.
Like when someone does rows, but they just feel it all in their biceps instead of their back.
The classic example. The fix there is to change the exercise, maybe
Yeah.
use a different grip or do a chest-supported row until you can actually feel the target muscle doing the work.
And a strength weak point is more of a mechanical issue, right? A weak link in the chain.
Exactly. Like if your grip gives out on a heavy deadlift before your back or legs do, your grip is the bottleneck.
And the solution isn't just to do more deadlifts.
No, that's inefficient. You need direct accessory work. You do farmer's walks or heavy barbell holds for time. You attack that weak link directly.
And what about movement weak points, the sticking points in a lift? The advice here can get pretty weird.
It can. The old advice to just pause at your sticking point is often a bad idea. When you pause, you lose the stretch reflex, which means you have to use less weight, so you're not actually getting stronger at that weak point with a heavy load.
So what are the better options?
The book lays out a few. First, you can use pauses, but not necessarily at the sticking point. A pause at the bottom of a bench press can teach you stability and a better starting position.
Okay, what else?
You can use isometrics, where you push or pull against an immovable pin set at your sticking point. Or you can use lift variations, like a close grip bench press, to strengthen the muscles that help you through that sticking point.
And the last one is speed work or explosive training.
Right. The idea is that if you can generate more speed and momentum before you get to the sticking point, you can just blast right through it. This is often done with bands or chains.
Before we move on, Level 4 also has firm rules on exercise order and range of motion.
Yes. For exercise order, it's simple. The most complex, fatiguing, and riskiest exercises, your big compound barbell lifts, always go first. You do them when you're fresh.
Unless you have a very specific bodybuilding goal, like bringing up a weak point.
Correct. If your calves are a huge weakness, doing some calf raises before you squat is fine, but doing heavy triceps extensions before you bench press is a bad idea because it will hurt your bench performance.
And for range of motion, what's the verdict?
The science is pretty clear. For hypertrophy, full range of motion is generally better, even if partial reps let you use more weight.
And for strength, it's back to specificity again.
Always. Partial squats only make you strong at partial squats. Full squats make you strong through the entire range of motion, so you should always aim for the fullest, safest range of motion your body allows.
We've covered the big foundational stuff. Now we're getting to the very top of the pyramid, levels 5 and 6, the fine-tuning details.
Exactly. Level 5 is all about rest periods and intensity techniques. These are the pebbles that people love to argue about in the gym, but they matter so much less than the stuff we've already covered.
Let's start with a time-saving one, antagonist paired sets, or APS.
APS is where you do a set of an exercise, like a bicep curl, and then during your rest period, you immediately do a set for the opposing muscle, like a triceps extension.
It's important to distinguish this from a normal superset, right?
Absolutely. A traditional superset is often doing 2 exercises for the same muscle back-to-back, like a bench press followed by dumbbell flies. That just creates a ton of fatigue and hurts your performance on the second exercise.
But with APS, because you're working opposing muscles, it can actually help.
There's some evidence it might. Working the antagonist muscle might cause a brief neurological effect that allows you to recruit more motor units in the primary muscle on your next set. Plus, it's just way more time efficient.
So where should you use this?
It's best for isolation exercises, pairing rows with presses or leg curls with leg extensions. But you absolutely should not do this with heavy squats and deadlifts. Those need your full, undivided rest and recovery.
Okay, let's talk about the really high-intensity techniques, drop sets and rest pause sets.
These are bodybuilding staples. They're all about taking a muscle to failure and beyond to try and recruit every last muscle fiber.
So a drop set is when you lift to failure, immediately drop the weight, and go to failure again, maybe a few times.
Right. And they are very time efficient. One study showed a single drop set sequence could provide a similar hypertrophy stimulus as 3 normal sets. The big downside, though,
It's impossible to track your progress.
it's a nightmare for progressive overload. You're constantly changing the weight, so you can't accurately track your volume load week to week.
And rest pause sets.
It's a bit more structured. You train to failure, rest for just 20 or 30 seconds, then go to failure again with the same weight, and repeat until you hit a target number of reps. It's a little easier to track.
But the big caution for both of these is to only use them on accessory work.
Please. Taking a heavy, complex lift like a squat or deadlift to failure repeatedly is just asking for an injury and creating way too much systemic fatigue. Save it for the machines and the dumbbell rack.
And that brings us to the very tip of the pyramid, level 6, lifting tempo. People get obsessed with this. Should we lift super slow for time under tension?
The book is very clear on this. For the most part, slow lifting is inferior for both strength and hypertrophy. People make the mistake of confusing time under tension with the magnitude of tension.
Can you explain that difference?
Sure. To lift a weight really slowly, like a 5-second up and 5-second down rep, you have to use a much lighter weight.
Right.
And that lighter weight means the actual force or the magnitude of tension on the muscle is much lower. And it's that high magnitude of tension from heavy weights that is the primary driver for getting bigger and stronger.
So even if the set lasts a long time, the stimulus isn't as potent.
That's the core of it. The one exception is that you must control the eccentric, or the lowering part of the lift. You can't just let gravity drop the weight.
For strength, that controlled eccentric sets you up in the right position for an explosive concentric or lifting phase.
Exactly. The intent on the way up should always be to move the bar as fast as possible, even if it's moving slowly because it's heavy. A traditional, fast but controlled rep that takes 2 to 4 seconds is superior in almost every case. Tempo is the final polish, not the foundation.
This has been an incredibly thorough look at the muscle and strength pyramid training. Let's quickly recap the whole structure for the listener.
So at the very bottom, the foundation, you have level 1, adherence. If your program isn't realistic, enjoyable, and flexible, none of the other stuff matters.
Then level 2, you have the main controls. Volume, intensity, and frequency. VIF. This is the core of your program design. And you use tools like RPE to manage it.
Level 3 is the engine that drives you forward. Progression and periodization. This is how you make sure the training gets harder over time, whether you're a novice, intermediate, or advanced lifter.
Level 4 is where you individualize it, exercise selection, technique, and specificity. You pick the right tools for your body and your goals, and you master them.
And then at the very top, the tiny little peak, levels 5 and 6, the fine-tuning, rest periods, intensity techniques, and lifting tempo. These are the last things you should worry about.
I think the biggest takeaway here is that so much of the confusion out there comes from people obsessing over those pebbles at the top, arguing about drop sets or tempo before they've even put the big rocks of adherence and progression in place.
And the book is very honest that even the sample programs in it can't be perfect for you, the listener. True long-term success has to be individualized. You have to adapt these principles to your own life. So that leads to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with.
Let's hear it.
We know that adherence, level 1, requires flexibility. And we know that RPE from level 2 is the main tool for that flexibility. But a lot of people feel secure with a rigid, predictable plan. They hate the uncertainty that comes with auto-regulation. So the question is, how will you reconcile that psychological need for certainty with the physiological need for flexibility? If you can't learn to embrace the uncertainty of RPE, your program will likely never be truly sustainable in the long run.
That's a fantastic question to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. For anyone who wants to learn more, the book points to great resources like the 3D Muscle Journey team and research reviews like MECALS. Go check them out and keep learning.